Joining me today is Julio Rosas. He is a senior writer for townhall.com. Julio, thanks so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Now, you were just on the ground in Minneapolis and you captured some crazy footage. I want to start with this footage that you captured of people looting a Dollar Tree. I'm going to play it for you, and I want you to tell our audience exactly what was going on.
At this point, the police station, which is right down the street from this Dollar Tree, it was under attack by rioters. So the law enforcement agencies, because there was also the Minnesota State Patrol and members of the National Guard, they were preoccupied with protecting that police department building, and so therefore the strip mall that's close by was basically up for grabs for looters to start ransacking it and start. It wasn't the only place that got hit that night in that strip mall. There was also a Boost Mobile store that also got hit pretty hard. But this Dollar Tree was just absolutely destroyed, and actually later it was set on fire. Although it wasn't completely engulfed in flames, it was able to be put out rather quickly. But it was there was a lot of smoke, and so it just kind of highlighted just kind of the craziness that is continuing in Brooklyn Center, which is just north of Minneapolis, and then of course we have the Derek Chauvin trial in the background of all this, and so it's just really highlighting how we're almost a year later from when this all started, and yet this is still kind of a common occurrence in not just Minneapolis or Minnesota, but everywhere across the country.
Something that I want to get your perspective on is obviously you've been to a lot of these protests, a lot of these riots, and where this looting goes on. Have you gotten a sense of why people actually turn to looting and to even, setting places on fire? Like, what's the motivation behind that?
It's just simple. It's just simply for the fact that they can get away with it, right? It's like I said, the whole reason why that Dollar Tree in particular and elsewhere in other places have been vulnerable is just because the police have been preoccupied with other things, or what's even worse is the fact that police are kind of too afraid to kind of take action because these riots have been sparked by controversial police interactions with the public that have led to deaths. And so you have officers who understandably don't want to be the next Derek Chauvin, or in this case, the next officer who accidentally shot Daunte Wright in Brooklyn Center. And so because there is that little bit of reluctance, they need to be able to have the numbers and the equipment to put down this mass hysteria and mass unrest, because or else then it's just very dangerous for them, because if it's just one or two or three and they have a whole mob of 100 people, it doesn't matter what kind of equipment you have, things aren't going to go well in that area. And so that's kind of the motivation. It's just simply for the fact that rioters and looters are able to get away with it. And we've seen, unfortunately, even the people that are arrested for pretty serious acts of violence, they're still either let go, without bail, or the district attorney just dropped charges. And so it just releases people back out into the street that probably shouldn't be. This happened around 11 o'clock at Central Time, and there was we were setting up to do a hit with Shannon Bream over at Fox News. And all of a sudden, the apartment complexes that was near the strip mall that was being looted, there was just a very considerable amount of gunfire coming from one of the courtyard areas. And so my guess was about 30 rounds were popped off in about 2 minutes, a minute or so. And you could tell it was different people firing at each other. And so they thankfully, it wasn't in my direction per se, but it just showed again how out of control things had gotten, and this was getting to the point in the night where a lot of the rioters had either gone home or they were still being pushed back from the police station. And so I don't know who was shooting at who. I do know that a couple ambulances were called to the scene, and a lot more law enforcement came as a result of these shootings. But again, it just really highlights the fact that we're not even at the Derek Chauvin verdict, mm-hmm. right? Because everyone's kind of expecting if it goes a certain way that, there'll be way more riots and way more unrest. And so here we have kind of a precursor to all of that. And we've got everything. We got fires, we got looting, we got rioting, and now we've got gunshots. And the really sad thing is in Minneapolis, especially in the areas around Minneapolis, they have seen a dramatic increase in shootings, and not just shootings, but other crimes, carjackings, robberies. And that kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier, where police are taking more of a relaxed approach because they don't want to be the next officer that makes a mistake or, you know, acts out in any way and then causes another controversy. And then on top of that, you have their police departments being defunded.
So something I just noticed just from, you know, this right now when we're talking is in this clip, you can actually see, I'm assuming that's your shadow, running toward the shooting, running toward, you know, the activity. When you're in this moment, I mean, obviously you're there as a journalist, but you're also there as a human. You know, you're also there to protect yourself. You know, you have to be aware of your surroundings. So can you sort of walk us through what was going through your head just from like a normal non-journalist standpoint, I guess?
Yeah, no, so I do wear a ballistic vest. I have armor plating that to protect myself. And really, I actually initially got that vest to protect myself from a rubber bullet, because I actually got shot with a rubber bullet last year in Minneapolis by the Minnesota State Police when I didn't have any armor at all whatsoever. So I initially got in the vest for that. But then as the riots continued and the violence increased, and so I had to actually upgrade it to be able to withstand rifle rounds in addition to handgun rounds. And so it is scary, I will admit, just because you don't know where exactly the shooting is coming from. Although the reason why I felt comfortable kind of going towards it is because it was a little bit off in the distance, but also most importantly, there wasn't any snapping sounds, because if you're being shot at, you're gonna hear the round snap past you. And so because I didn't hear that, but I felt comfortable going towards it. But you also see me kind of hugging the side of the building there. And I wouldn't say necessarily that I can't think of it through a non-journalistic perspective, just because the whole reason why I'm going towards it is because I want to be able to capture it as close as I can, so that I can then show everybody else what's happening in real time. So because in a non-journalistic mindset, the idea is to go the opposite direction, and really that's the smart thing to do. I fully admit that. But with this job, I mean, it is dangerous. It's not easy, but again, it's necessary. And so because I, you know, have a little bit of training in the Marine Corps, because I have certain protections with me, I felt comfortable enough in that specific situation to push forward. But I fully admit it's pretty stupid, but you know, what are you gonna do?
Without you obviously being there, we would not be able to see what's actually happening on the ground. And I want to talk a little bit more about what you mentioned in your last answer in terms of like you running toward the action because you want people to see what's actually going on. Can you talk a little bit more about that and sort of why you want people to see what's going on?
So part of my motivation to cover these types of dangerous events is just because it is of my opinion that the mainstream media has done a very terrible job covering these things in real time. There are a few exceptions, but overall, I think it just part of the media bias and part of the bubbles that they're in, it has kind of clouded the way that they cover these things, right? They want to say it's mostly peaceful. They want to say, you know, it's not really rioting going on, and we saw examples of that last year, and so that's why people were really frustrated, because it's like, no, there are very dangerous, violent things happening at these types of events, and that's in no way peaceful, and yet why are you trying to kind of gaslight the country? And even today, still, even news stories that have been written this year have kind of whitewashed all the violence that happened last year, and so that's part of my reason why, is just because I know that since the mainstream media is not going to do as good of a job as they should do, and you know, they have more resources than myself or Town Hall has, but it's also as weird as it is to admit, it is exciting to be at these types of things. It is an adrenaline rush. It is, you go through a lot of emotions during that time, and so it's important to get the story out there, because this is something that's affecting everyday Americans across the country, not just in places like Minneapolis, and particularly again with rising crime in cities all across the country. And so because it's just to do this. It's just the fact that I enjoy covering it. I think it's important, and if the mainstream media isn't going to do as good of a job, I might as well help pick up the slack.
You know, something that you talked about earlier just a little bit was the presence of law enforcement. Can you talk a little bit more about sort of how they've been reacting to the protesting, to the rioting? As you mentioned, you know, we're almost a year into this since last May's event with George Floyd and Derek Chauvin. How have they been reacting? And can you try to give us sort of their perspective of the events that are unfolding?
So specifically with this latest round in Brooklyn Center, so Minneapolis and the Twin Cities metro area, they have instituted, the local governments, they've instituted what's being called Operation Safety Net, which is bringing in outside law enforcement agencies and members of the National Guard to kind of help and be staged in the areas in case, again, if the verdict comes out and a lot of people don't like the outcome. And so, unfortunately, it kind of showed this riot that happened in the city, literally just north of Minneapolis. It kind of showed a weakness in that planning because everyone has been so focused on Minneapolis and St. Paul. The other places have kind of been left out a little bit. And so the members of the National Guard were out in Brooklyn Center the first night that rioting broke out, which was Sunday. However, it kind of came too late. They came out like around 11, and the events, you know, the course of events were escalating very quickly as time went on, and starting in the early afternoon. So, I mean, this isn't new, right? Like this, people know what's going to happen when something controversial like this is going to happen, and so, in my opinion, they're a little bit slower than they should have been because they already had the resources literally 15 minutes away, and yet it had to take more mass looting and mass violence in order for those extra assets that were already on the ground to be deployed to Brooklyn Center. And so, as the days have progressed since Sunday, there has been much more of a faster response time. Last night's riots actually started a little bit earlier than Monday night when I was there, but it also ended a lot sooner than Monday night because there was extra law enforcement and more National Guard members there. And so we're seeing them get better at this, but again, it's kind of like, well, we've had almost a year now to prepare for this, and we know what's going to happen because it hasn't just taken place in Minneapolis. It's Kenosha, Los Angeles, Portland. I mean, so we know what's going to happen, and so it seems the leadership, you know, I'm not knocking the officers because obviously they're putting themselves in harm's way, but it seems the leadership needs to do a much better job at utilizing the resources and assets that they have available to them, especially if they already have them staged 15 minutes away.
Well, Julio, I know that you'll be heading back to Minneapolis pending, you know, the trial ending for Derek Chauvin. So I'd love to have you back on to talk more about what unfolds there. I'm sure there will be some type of reaction no matter what the verdict is. So I really appreciate you coming on. As always, please stay safe, and I look forward to covering and following your reporting. So thank you so much.
Thank you.